We've got a man of many crazy stories on the podcast. Josh James from the band Stick to Your Guns was in town. He usually trains at South Loop when he's in Chicago on tour, which is actually quite often. And this time had a bit of a back injury, so we did a podcast instead of an exercise routine. And this is probably the hardest I've laughed during any podcast I've done. So apologies in advance if you can't handle my cackling. But I thought that Josh may have told all the crazy stories that he has inside of him on other interviews, but he pulled out a few more good ones. We did have an audio problem with Josh's mic at the beginning of this podcast, so apologies for that. Tried to clean it up in post-production, so it gets better somewhere around 10, 13 minutes in, something like that. So apologies for that, but I think that you will have a nice little giggle if you listen to this one, so enjoy. Does he always go with you guys?
No, he used to play in a band with me called Casey Jones.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Played drums.
Yeah.
And then actually I was in another band called Evergreen Terrace that he toured with as the crew for a long time, and then he actually ended up playing drums for a while in that band as well. But then after Casey Jones broke up and I joined Stick to Your Guns, he had to suffer the straight life. So he's been stuck in Jacksonville, Florida for quite a few years now, doing a job that I would argue that he probably doesn't really love. And so there's been a couple of times where Stick to Your Guns has needed someone to come out, and it's crazy that he's been able to ask his job, and they go, yeah, you can have a month off.
Yeah.
So he's out driving us, which is cool for me because everyone in Stick to Your Guns is like inconsistent with like working out or with fitness. George, a drummer, got into CrossFit for a while, and then he smashed his teeth out doing a clean in the parking lot at the venue in Arizona a few years ago. So after that, he just stuck with some body weight movements.
What did he do? Just pull the bar too hard and just?
I was on stage like fixing a tripod before the show, and someone was Josh, George needs you. He smashed his teeth out with the barbell, and I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, he fucked himself up good. And after that, he just now he's like double under a cane.
Cool.
Like he can't really.
So does he have like dentures?
What's crazy is they fix his teeth very nicely. I wish I knew the dentist so we could give him a shout out. But he stayed away from the barbell since then.
Yeah, I had some buddies when we were first getting into CrossFit who would ask me for some help on stuff and some technique stuff, and one of them was talking about how he would do cleans and he would just end up falling over backwards all the time. I'm like, I don't understand what you mean.
He's all about that third pool.
Yeah, I'm like, I just don't actually understand what's happening. Like, show it to me. Let's look at it, whatever. And we actually go to a gym called Quads here, which is kind of like a bodybuilding gym, right? So it's a lot of machines. It's pretty chaotic in there. There's a lot of different stuff. And we wanted to lift on their weightlifting platforms, but then you're not allowed to drop weight on it. So it's kind of a weird thing that they have it. And so we're doing cleans in this sort of chaotic little area with just stuff everywhere. And he's doing this hang clean. He just pulls the shit out of the bar. It flies up and kind of like catches him in the throat. And then he just doesn't let go. And it just completely knocks him over backwards.
And he's like, that's how he maxes out every time. Like, these guys are crazy.
And I'm like, now I see I understand why you fall over backwards when you do.
You shouldn't do this movement.
So I wonder if it was something like that where he just cranked it.
I think he was just getting a little bit too excited and probably not having enough weight on the bar, and thinking like, I gotta pull this motherfucker from the ground. Next thing you know, you're laying on the ground, your mouth's full of blood.
Yeah, that's incredible. Do you guys bring weights with you then?
Yeah, actually, in 2013 Warped Tour, I believe. Again, Faster hooked me up with a bunch.
Oh yeah, because they were kind of like supplying stuff. Yeah, that's awesome.
So what travels with me in the U.S. is I got like 450 pounds worth of weights, a squat rack, bench, plyo box, a couple kettlebells, slam ball, and some dumbbells. So there's definitely enough to fuck myself up with, which that's usually what happens, especially in George's case. But when we're in Europe, I just have like a 70 pound kettlebell that just rolls around, and that's enough.
There you go. Do some European kettlebell swings.
Yeah. The last tour that we did, I actually got everybody on it was like a thing where we tried to do like a little bit of body weight workout every day, and then we would do 50 swings. We tried to do 50 swings unbroken every week, increase, and then do like some farmer's walks with a kettlebell. They put people in the
Yeah. And do they look at you as the sort of workout psycho? They're like, oh, like Josh, like he's just always working out. Like, he's a weird muscle guy.
Which kind of sucks because a lot of times it's funny that people just assume that that's all that I'm into, or they also assume that I love sports, but I'm not.
Yeah.
You know, like I know nothing about sports. I grew up, the only sport I ever played as a kid was soccer in 3rd grade. I was on a team called the Red Devils. We lost every single game.
Dude.
I was like super fat, and a girl kicked me in the nuts one time, and that was about my sports career right there. But and I was never into lifting weights. Skateboarding was the only thing that I did actively throughout my youth. And then one day, one of the guys from Casey Jones was like, "Hey, I got this bench press program. You want to bench press?" And I was like kind of bored, like, "Yeah,
sure."
So I kind of got into it that way. And then with CrossFit, I think I had injured my neck playing a show or something, so I just started
headbanging or doing a sick jump.
It was probably just banging the head a little bit hard. But what I like to do when I injure myself is eat, right? And mostly sugar.
Yeah, fuels recovery.
Right, and that makes everything better. And so I remember I just started like gaining so much weight, and I'm ashamed to say that it was one day I remember I was having sex, and I looked down and I went, ew, that's sexy, this person. And then I was like, oh, I need to get in shape. And so that kind of like motivated me and my brother.
Your view was blocked a little bit?
It was a little rough. And so then I started getting into CrossFit, and then I think, since then I've done like 900 different programs, and the only one that really gets you shredded is like absolute depression. That's the one that's worked for me, but it's fun. It's fun to try to see what programs out there work.
Yeah. So you were talking about Casey Jones a bit, which was that the first like actual band that you were in?
No, it's Evergreen Terrace.
Okay, so Evergreen. Because Casey Jones was a side project for Evergreen Terrace. Yeah, got it.
Casey Jones started in 2003.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So Evergreen Terrace was kind of like the first foray into. Yeah.
I had been in some smaller bands before that, but that was the first band that like really put out records, toured.
Yeah.
Started having a fan base, and where I could actually I lived off the band, which was unexpected.
It's the dream.
Wonderful. Yeah, it really is. I was having a discussion with someone the other day that it's insane to think that since 2002 or 3, I haven't had to have another job because I've been lucky enough with the bands that I've played in. I've been able to just tour and people come and see it. So it's very cool.
Yeah, that works out well.
Yeah.
So Evergreen Terrace and Casey Jones kind of more, hardcore, kind of melodic hardcore, all that kind of stuff. Is that sort of your main background, was from that sort of hardcore type of scene, or were you a nu metal child, or what's the deal?
I was never into nu metal. I grew up on punk music.
Yeah.
In the 3rd or 4th grade, I was at a secondhand store, and there was a Misfits shirt that didn't say Misfits, just had the big skull on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's cool. And it was $1.65, I remember, and I had $2. And my mom had told me I could buy anything I wanted. So I bought this, the Crimson Ghost shirt. And my mom hated it. She's a right-wing conservative Christian woman, and she was like, this is evil. You told me I could buy it. So I'd wear it like every day. And then one day this older kid was like, hey, you like the Misfits? I'm like, I don't know what that is, man. The only tapes I had was like an MC Hammer tape and a Milli Vanilli tape.
Yeah.
And then he gave
me... It was basically the Misfits. Yeah. It's basically the same.
And so he gave me a Misfits tape, and I remember listening to this and listening to it, and I was like, oh man, this is cool. There's talking about teenage Mars, and, And so I just thought the lyrical content was cool, and I liked the way it sounded, and then that kind of, I think in when I was around 12, that's when I really started getting into music and finding bands like Rancid and things like that of that era, and then it kind of just went from there. But I didn't get into hardcore and metal really until I was probably 15, and that was, I was already listening to bands like Minor Threat and Gorilla Biscuits and Youth of Today, but I just thought those were punk bands.
Yeah.
And then also the area that I grew up in, I didn't have an older brother to really like guide me and tell me. So it's kind of me and my best friend Justin just trying to figure everything out. And like we found out like what straight edge was. Like we didn't even know that was a thing. We just thought it was a song and all this stuff. And then Strife and Earth Crisis got me into like metal, hardcore, like that kind of stuff, and then started kind of getting into it. And then Evergreen Terrace started because I was in a bunch of punk bands beforehand, and I grew up outside of Jacksonville, Florida, and the scene really in Jacksonville was predominantly punk bands. And so I just wanted to start something different once, my punk band broke up. And so a couple other guys that I knew that were into hardcore were like, yeah, let's try to make a hardcore band. We had no clue what we were doing. And then somehow now I'm here.
There we go. Hey, it's Todd jumping in here real quick. This is where we realized we had an audio problem. So from this point forward, audio should be a little bit better. Sorry about that. We got amateur hour running over here. Thanks for your patience.
You should edit everything into lies.
Yeah, we'll make it just more fake news.
Just make me sound like, like pro-Trump.
Even more fake news. I mean, you are, aren't you?
I mean, who isn't, 4 more years, right?
I agree.
Kill me.
I fully agree. So you essentially in Florida are discovering all this punk music on your own. Did you have no older guiding force?
No, not really. My friend Justin, he had an older brother who was into punk and like emo and hardcore. So there was some stuff that we found out through him, but a lot of it was just kind of finding a record that we liked and then reading the thanks list and seeing other bands and getting zines and stuff like that, and just going to shows and finding out about bands that we just liked and connected to.
Yeah. I think that's a lost art, the thanks list.
It really is. And it's funny because my wife knows nothing about punk and hardcore and stuff. So, she'll be like, tell me a story. And I'm like, okay. And, I'll tell her all these things. And it really does suck because one of my favorite parts about putting out a record is the artwork and is like how the layout of the insert is and all those things and the thanks list and all that. And so when Stick to Your Guns puts out a record, I usually like combing through it to make sure there's no errors and making sure that we've thanked all the right bands that we know we really do want to thank, that we've toured with or whatever. And then I realized no one cares about this anymore. Yeah. This is sad. This is very sad that no one gives a shit what the artwork looks like. But I guess just got to adapt. But I still have like tons of CDs. Like every once in a while I'll just pull one out and I'll just read the thanks list and be like, oh, I never checked out this band. Yeah. And then I'll get on Spotify and check them out and go, oh, I don't like them.
And then there should be like a thanks list feature on Spotify.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I think it would be awesome if, like, when you got on Spotify, if there was just a digital layout. Yeah. Because also what's crazy to me is such a big part of, especially punk and hardcore and metal, are the lyrics. And it's crazy to me to think that now that most people just put on a record and they go, yeah, this sounds cool. And I'm like, man, but don't you know how much good shit is being said in here? And sometimes I guess you can like Google it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I do actually think that the ability for a band to almost like, like the thanks list of old, right, would be awesome on Spotify, where you could then just sort of curate your own list relative to your album. Like, hey, if you like this, you should also check out this.
Yeah, or if bands could like list bands, these are other bands that inspired us.
Yeah.
And then you just click on it like that. So
yeah, that's a really good
maybe
idea.
We're onto something.
Yeah.
We got to start our own app.
Yeah.
$19.99 a month. Find out what bands we like.
I'll tell you for free. I'll tell you all the time what bands I like, and people are like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
I don't care.
Never mind.
Yeah, we were actually just in our coaches meeting. We made a Grateful Dead shirt. Right.
I saw that out front.
Yeah.
I also saw the typo negative shirt and the Prince shirt.
Yeah.
Insane merch display.
Yeah. No one gets any of this stuff, but a surprising number of people have just literally never heard of the Grateful Dead. And
what?
2 of our coaches in our coaches meeting were 2 of those people. And then we're kind of talking about it. I'm like, okay, come on. Like, you have to have heard of something like this. Like, have you heard of Fish? And they're like, no.
How old are these people?
I mean, mid-20s, like, but not young enough that should be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's fucked up because, I mean, like, obviously I wasn't alive when the Grateful Dead was ripping.
Yeah.
But I know who they are.
Yeah.
Same thing with Fish. Yeah. I mean, I don't like them. But
I
know who it is, but that's wild.
Yeah, I don't know how people manage to be. I I mean, I guess it's just, it shows that people who are into music, our perspective on what people
I think what it really shows is that we are getting old. That's what it really shows.
Also
when,
true.
When you're like, oh, you know the movie The Goonies? And someone's like, no.
No.
Like, what? How old are you? They're like 12. And I'm like, why am I talking to a 12-year-old right now?
I guess I should leave this junior
this
high
is
that
weird.
I'm in. I stumbled into a local junior
Shit.
high. Whoops. My fault. All right. So we were talking about your background in a variety of punk music. And I think something that's really interesting is that 18 Visions, right, is a band that you were probably into sometime in that era, yeah?
Oddly enough, I'm not saying this to sound cool or something, but I was never a huge 18 Visions fan.
Yeah.
They put out the record Vanity, and we did a bunch of shows together. Evergreen and 18 Visions did, and I did like that record. But other than that, I never really got into them. And it wasn't until they asked me if I was interested in playing guitar that I went and listened to their old catalog. And it was kind of crazy that joining the band actually made me become a fan.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, these songs are sick. Like, the record, Until the Ink Runs Out. Like, I was like, this is a great record. This is crazy. I didn't really appreciate it when I was younger, but yeah, it's kind of a weird way to get into a band, become a fan by joining the band. But that's the same way with Stick to Your Guns. I wasn't really a big fan of Stick to Your Guns. I thought that they were a great live band, but I wasn't really into the records. But when they asked me to join the band, things with Evergreen and me were kind of on the outs. And I really loved everyone in Stick to Your Guns, and I loved what they were trying to do and the message. And that was whenever the record Diamond was being recorded, and I heard the songs and I go, oh, well, I like these songs. This is like a win-win for me.
Yeah, it works out perfectly.
So yeah, it's been a cool way to become fans of bands by joining them, essentially.
Yeah, so it's sort of like if you want a girl to like you have to pretend you're not into her.
Right. Yeah, it's like
Okay, cool.
Yeah. No, that never worked for me. I was like, when I met my wife, I was like, please, you don't understand. Like, I know it's our destiny. And she's like, I'll think about it. And now she's like, all right, I guess you're right. I'll marry you.
Yeah. So, yeah, you just got to overwhelm people with aggression and desperateness. That usually works out.
That's my approach. Just true aggression with trying to stay on the line of, like, legal.
Sure.
It's 2018. You can get in trouble real quickly nowadays.
Yeah. So you actually were not a huge fan of 18 Visions.
No, and it's not like I thought they sucked.
Yeah. Well, I had a somewhat similar experience with them where they were a little bit too. I mean, I had very funny opinions on metalcore in the early 2000s. That were very arbitrary in retrospect. Right.
As they always are.
Yeah. Right.
Especially when you're younger.
Yeah. It's like, I love Poison the Well, but hate Unearth.
Right.
Why? I don't know.
Because they're like more metal.
Yeah.
Something like that.
What's the distinguishing factor? Who knows?
Yeah.
But they 18 Visions actually played this festival near where I grew up in the skate park, and that was when they were starting to transition into the more
rock,
fashionable type of situation. Yeah. And I definitely looked down on them as a 16-year-old.
I think a lot of people did. I think at that time the whole fashion core thing was either something that you fully embraced or you're like, man, this is whack.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I think that even they kind of just find it funny now. I mean, because at the same time, like, they're kids also just trying to figure out who they were and what the band was and all that stuff. And but they're great dudes, and I really enjoy being in the band. It's cool that it's cool to play those really old songs, and I think that their fans are stoked for whenever we do play shows to be playing songs off the first couple of records, and we don't really play any of the rock stuff.
Yep.
And then even the record that was put out last year is a very just heavy, kind of brutal record, and so we've started writing some new songs, and it's definitely that again. It's just drop A, just punch someone in the face kind of riffs.
Yeah, that newer record is very heavy.
Yeah,
very heavy. which is...
Did you just do something?
No, it's good.
Okay.
It just kicked over. It screwed up earlier, but we're okay now. We might
The screen looks like something from a sci-fi movie from like 1987, where it's like the future, 1996.
Yeah, you know, Adobe with their hyper 2018 user interface looks good though. No, we're good to go. So, a question I have for you, because I think this is actually really interesting, right? Where you're in Stick to Your Guns, you've been in Evergreen Terrace, Casey Jones, in 18 Visions, and then also Stick to Your Guns tours with a lot of different styles of band, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
And kind of like we were just talking about, at some point when you are younger or growing up or getting into various subcultural styles of music, you have these very strong opinions about different genres and what band is cool and what band is not cool, and it's okay to like this but not okay to like that. And I was wondering if you had that same experience growing up and at some point you kind of grew out of it, or if that's something that you just have always been open to, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to play with this kind of band, we're going to play with that kind of band.
As far as being a fan, I definitely remember when I was younger that I would go to a show and there would be like 12 people there. And I remember thinking like, this is awesome. Yeah. No one's here. This is like my little secret. And then, a few years later, I started playing in bands and I'd play for 12 people and I'd go, this sucks. And then I realized like, oh, you won't be able to be there. But I think starting out, there's obviously bands that you want to play with, because you're like, oh, this is a band that influenced us, that's bigger, that's whatever. But every band that I've ever been in has always just been fully open to playing with anyone. Evergreen played like shows with Guttermouth, and then also would play shows with nu metal bands sometimes, and then also would tour with Hatebreed and play shows with, Throwdown and Norma Jean and 18 Visions and all the bands from that time. And it's the same thing with Stick to Your Guns. We do appreciate the challenge of playing for a completely different crowd. A few years ago, we did a small tour with Lagwagon and Pennywise. Yeah. And so that is where we are huge fans of both of those bands. That's not our typical crowd. Right. So it's kind of cool to like look at it as a challenge, like see if we can win the crowd over, see how it works. And it works well. And then even earlier this year, we did a tour in the States with Parkway Drive, which some people would think that we share same audience, but we really don't.
No, yeah, I see that as being pretty different.
Yeah, they've definitely crossed over into like a radio market, and we took that as a challenge, and that was a really hard challenge. A lot of those people were just like, nah, get off the stage. We want Parkway Drive. Yeah, so, you never know what you're going to get, but, it's the easiest thing to do isn't always the most fun. And like, I really don't like to go through life not being challenged. I think that's what even attracts me to strength and conditioning and CrossFit, because it is a constant challenge. There's something that, I can deadlift 550, but I can't do 6 unbroken muscle ups, and so there's always that challenge no matter what. And it's confined in the same area. It's all inside the gym. And it's the same way. It's, it's confined inside of these venues. And sometimes you can go there and you can fucking knock it out of the park, when we're on tour with Counterparts and Straight from the Path and Hatebreed, or we can show up with Lagwagon and Pennywise and Parkway Drive, and then it's like, oh fuck, man, that was a brutal set to get through. And then at the end of the night, a lot of times at the end of the night, you judge the show as like, okay, do we sell any shit? Like, did people buy stuff? And it's like, no. And they're like, all right, well, that was as bad as I thought. And then there's other times where it's the crowd's kind of dead. And then the end of the night, the merch guy's like, yeah, man, you fucking sold 1 billion CDs and a ton of shirts and shit. You're like, okay, great. This is just a crowd that had never heard us. So I think being open to that always has an element of it being scary a little bit, but that is the exciting part. And there's definitely moments of pure misery with it. There's one of the worst things is standing on stage playing for a crowd, no matter what the size is, and just looking out there and going, I can't fucking tell if anyone cares. And at the same time, you're like trying to put some sort of like energy, emotional energy, physical energy into playing the song, and then you're like, get me off this fucking stage, like just shove a burrito in my mouth, that's all I want right now. So that is the challenging part, and that happens with every tour. Even the great tours have those shows.
Yeah, so it's almost something that you guys do on purpose as like, all right, we're going to see what happens. We're going to challenge ourselves as a band.
It is definitely something. And I think that we usually, after we try a certain thing a couple of times and we go, okay, this doesn't work, then we'll scrap it. We know that maybe going out with a certain band that we've gone out with 2 or 3 times and it just doesn't work. Okay, next time we shouldn't go out with them, and then we also know what really does work well for us, so we can sandwich those type of tours in between the ones where we're really taking a risk. We're like, okay, this is a risky tour, but the next tour, we know we'll fucking knock it out of the park. So at least we have that to look forward to.
Yeah, and there's also probably more upside potential for doing those kind of riskier tours, right? That you can get a whole new audience if it's the right
Absolutely,
thing.
Absolutely. And there are times we did a tour in 2013 with the band Motionless in White.
Oh yeah.
Right?
I was actually going to ask about that too, because the 18 Visions connection.
Yeah, so we did this tour with Motionless in White, and it was Motionless in White and Chelsea Grin were on it, and that's not really bands that we would share an audience with, and that was one of the greatest tours that we've ever done. Like, their fans were so into it and so supportive, and then we saw immediately the next time that we did a tour in the States, we saw kids with face paint on and Motionless in White shirts and like depressing looking goth kids. Yeah. And they're like, hey, I saw you at the Motionless in White show. I love you guys. And we're like, sick, it worked. Yeah. And then there's other times where, you play with a certain band and they're just like, you'll never, you can tell the fans like, you'll never see me again.
Yeah.
I will fuck your band.
I will never be here. Yeah, I think that Motionless in White tour is almost exactly what I was thinking of, right? Where, I guess I'm not totally familiar with what that audience is, but to me, they're actually one of the best nu metal bands of all time.
Yeah, it's crazy because to me, they sound, I haven't listened to the record that they came out with, which the name's escaping me right now, sounded, 90% of it sounded like Bleeding Through.
Yeah.
It had some like great riffs, like a lot of fast stuff, just like intense, screaming, and then some of a little bit of singing in it. But their fans were younger, just like mall metal goth kids. It wasn't something where you saw a bunch of like hardcore Harrys that are like pretentious. Yeah. People trying to like wreck the pit. It's a lot of like push pitters kids that listen to Slipknot as well, which is great because a lot of times, unfortunately, when you play for subcultures like punk and hardcore, there becomes this elitist attitude sometimes to where it's like, oh, your band's not cool enough, or this band's not cool enough. And when you play with a band like Motionless in White, their crowd, which usually comes from a more of a mainstream type of underground, they're just like, oh, this is heavy, and these guys in this band seem pissed off, and like, fuck yeah, I hate my dad. Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna slam my body to this, like this is cool. And that's rad, because I think that at the end of the day, I think that's like what punk and hardcore is about. It's about connecting with the music. So, but that was a great tour for us.
Yeah, I think that's your point about elitism there, I think, is really, really salient, right? Where especially in punk and hardcore, that it is easy for people to get kind of wrapped up in the signaling of the different bands that they like, and oh, this band is cool, this band is not cool. But that there's a lot of other scenes where people are much more just excited about music in general. They're just way more happy to be there.
Right.
Like, yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think that with all the bands that I've been in, I've seen that a lot, especially in places like America, Australia, the UK, where there are these tight-knit underground communities. And it's like your band's cool, and then your band's just not cool, and then sometimes your band becomes cool again, and so that's always a challenge, I think, with trying to be continually connected to that scene. And then at a certain point, you just kind of got to let it go, but then we'll go and play a place like Europe, like mainland Europe, like Germany, for example, and there is that tight-knit community of hardcore, but because I guess for some reason heavy music there is just not looked at as so underground or so outrageous that there are also are so many more quote unquote normal people that will come to the shows as well. So you'll see like a dad drinking a beer next to a kid that's wearing, you know, a piece by piece shirt or something like that. And it's cool. It's interesting because, you know, I think the diversity is what makes life interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, your idea of sort of flipping back and forth between, I guess, tours that are more sort of expected for your band and then stuff that's a little bit more whatever genre blending is really, I mean, I think that's a great idea because I know for me, I prefer stuff that's all over the place, right? Like a stick to your guns, motionless and white tour. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like,
see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I know that for other people, they don't want that. They want, right.
And a lot of times we'll get shit sometimes for going out with certain bands, like, you know, like on this tour, Muir's out with us.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're going out with Muir, they don't stand for anything. You know, like they're just this wannabe new metal band or some shit like that. And then it's just like, dude, not everything has to mean something. Not everything has to stand for something. And also, like, you can't say whatever that guy's singing about doesn't mean something to him. You know, like those are his lyrics. That's what his message is or what his message isn't. And so it's interesting how it goes both ways. There's definitely sometimes that people try to persecute us for going out with a band that doesn't have the same belief structure as us. And it's like, man, if we were to go out with only bands that preached from the stage like we sometimes do, it would be very boring.
Yeah.
You know, because it would be going out the same 3 bands, 5 bands.
Yeah. Something that I think with those sort of subgenre clashes that's really interesting is that if things are totally different, people don't have problems with them.
Right.
But if they're kind of close, then people get so mad.
Yeah, if it's like a pop punk band and a metalcore band, like, oh, that's cool. I like Newfound Glory.
Yeah.
You know, but if it's, you know, a metalcore band and then like a slightly different variation of metalcore, which there's so many, the term metalcore and all of the different terms gets so confusing and ridiculous, really. But yeah, I feel you on that.
Yeah, it's like if there's a possibility that an outsider could confuse you what you like for that thing,
right,
then you almost have to like defend your identity.
Right.
Because to some just standard person, yeah, Muir and Stick to Your Guns, it's like, oh yeah, there's like some heavy riffs and some guy yelling. It's basically the same stuff. You're like, it's not the same.
Right. It becomes very tribal, you know, and it's almost like when I was a kid, it would be the same thing as someone be like, oh yeah, so you like the Disturbed? And it's like, no, fuck you. I don't like the fucking Disturbed. Fuck you. I like Earth Crisis and April. It's not the same thing. They're like, well, I don't know. It just sounds loud and heavy and a guy's screaming about something. It's completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, it's like Presbyterians arguing with Methodists. Where,
exactly.
You know, you're like, I don't know the difference.
Right.
Seems the same to me, but it's totally not when you're on the inside of it. You have to.
Yeah. And they each think almost a portion of each think that the other are completely wrong.
Oh yeah. So something that I always wonder about a band like Stick to Your Guns kind of has a sound, right? That you guys have several records, certain amount of success, and then there's an expectation of what you're going to sound like. Right?
Yeah.
And how do you balance that with your new creative output? Is that something that you have to think about? Okay, like we need to make sure we have this kind of song. We need to make sure we have that kind of song. The people aren't going to like it if there's not this kind of mosh part, and we need this chorus.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris, the other guitar player, and I probably talk about that every other day, you know, and how we are as individuals, I guess, artistically torn to create a reproduction of a song that the fans connect to. And it's kind of hard because on one hand, it's like, I only want to play the stuff that I create because I feel something from it. And then on the other hand, you go, well, but I do kind of still need to pay my rent, and like these kids like this type of song. So we try to find a middle ground where it's like, okay, we should write a song for this next record that sounds like Against Them All, which is like a fairly well-known song of ours. And so I'll have that idea like, okay, it needs to have heavy verses and then like a catchy chorus. And hopefully we've had success with being personally happy with all the songs that we put out, but it's starting to get kind of hard because Chris and I were just talking about this the other day, is it's starting to feel a little bit redundant. And now when I listen to True View, the last record that we put out, I loved recording that record. I loved writing that record. I loved whenever we finished it. But now when I listen to it, I'm like, nah, it's okay. And that's how I feel with every record. And I don't know if that's just a thing where I'm just not happy. I will never be always happy with something,
of course,
because I change. Or if it's just because I feel like, man, we tried to do that too much, or we try to do this too much. But, yeah, that's the hard part. And I started writing, Chris and I both started writing new songs a couple months ago. And I was having a discussion with him where it's like, man, I feel so unmotivated to write anything kind of like we've had before. And a lot of the stuff that I'm writing is just very like heavy and a little bit kind of darker, I guess. And so it's like, we'll see what the next record sounds like. But with that said, I don't think that there will ever be a Stick to Your Guns record that sounds completely different than the last 3 records. 3 or 4 records have had a very similar, consistent sound, where there's been little things here and there added to switch it up. Like at the last record, there was like a rock song.
Yeah.
And I think we'll always try to do something a little bit different here and there. But I think it will always remain a somewhat signature type of sound that we've had. And that's a lot of that is just from the riffs, like the way that the riffs are played. It's kind of, we're not going to switch that completely up because that's the way that Chris and I have been writing.
Yeah. Because part of the art is not just writing the song itself, but it's establishing the sort of structure of the band that the song is going to fit into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a hard part. That's the hard thing whenever we throw in songs that are maybe a little bit more rock driven, is that then it's like, okay, is this song out of place? Like, people seem to like it on the internet or whatever, or it gets a lot of listens on Spotify or views on YouTube, but is this too out of place? Because whenever we put it sandwiched in between 5 like really aggressive songs, is it too in left field? And so that's something that I think we're constantly just trying to figure out. But we started writing songs a while ago, and there's like one song that if you had Rivers from Weezer sing on it, it would sound like a Weezer song. But if Jesse's screaming over it, it just sounds like, oh, this is kind of a weird thing that Stick to Your Guns is doing. So I don't know. Who knows what the fuck's going to happen?
Yeah. I do think that you guys, sort of like we were talking about, where you have the ability to tour with a lot of different styles of bands. Yeah. Within your sound, I think you have enough variability, right? Where it's like, okay, if, in broad strokes, what does Stick to Your Guns sound like? A heavy H2O. Right. Which means you can kind of go in like the heavier, moshier direction. You can go in the more like poppier direction. You can go in a more rock direction. None of that is totally off limits.
And that does work well for us. And I think you're absolutely right. That does help with being able to tour with a vast different amount of bands, because we can kind of alter our set list. We're like, okay, we know not to play the song that has a super fast punk beat at 210 BPMs, on this show, because no one's going to care about it. So that does work well for us to be able to kind of cater to each type of crowd that we think that we're playing for. And sometimes that backfires as well, because there's been times where it's been great to be like the heaviest band on a package. And then there's also times where it's great to be like the softest band on a package. So it's just kind of figuring it out day by day.
Yeah, and you don't want to always cater to that audience, right? So sometimes you can get more from the crowd by, like you said, being
confusing them.
Yeah, for sure. You're like, surprise! Here's this kind of part. Like, what is this?
And I try to really I try to have the mentality of, and not in a negative way, but I try to have the mentality of like play at the crowd instead of for the crowd, and so to kind of get rid of that notion that I need the approval of the crowd, and I'm just like, all right, motherfuckers, this is what I got for you. Either take it or leave it.
Yeah. And have you always had that ability? Because I think that's tough for anyone who's performing, to find that balance of, you need to be aware of what the audience is responding to and what's going well, but you don't want to be whatever needy in terms of like needing a reaction from them or needing certain feedback to do your thing?
I have definitely not always had that ability. There have been many shows where I've had a horrible time because I've allowed the energy of the crowd to creep inside of me and just go, this fucking sucks. I should just get off this fucking stage, you know? And the worst would be, after being in Casey Jones, because I sang for Casey Jones, that's when I learned that singers have it the worst.
Yeah.
Because at least whenever I'm playing a bad show and I'm playing guitar, I can kind of go, all right, we'll just focus on playing the guitar really well.
Yeah.
You know, like don't fuck any parts up. But whenever you're
face
singing,
the drummer for a bit.
Yeah, you're like, oh, fuck. Like, I just want to get this over with. Let's cut 10 songs. Like, get me off the stage. But yeah, I think that that's something with time that I have accepted and kind of understood that it's like, oh, well, if they don't like it, then they can fuck off. They don't have to come back. You know, I don't have to come back. You know, and then also I've also learned that just because people aren't throwing themselves off of the PA speakers and stabbing each other in the face, that doesn't mean that they're having a bad time. You know, last night's show was mild. It was like a diet hardcore show. It was like Hardcore Zero. You know, it was completely sugar free, but there were some moments where there was some flavor in there. But then, you know, talk to the merch guy and he's like, yeah, fucking killed it, merch, did great. And it's like, okay, well, I guess they like the band. It's just not a crowd that wants to set it off. And also at the same time, like, I mean, how often do you go to a show now and go, yeah, I'm going to get in the pit.
Yeah.
I'm going to wreck this.
0 times.
Yeah. You know what I mean? There's like once a year where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go nuts. And other than that, so I'm like, okay, maybe I'm just playing for a bunch of people that are just like me.
Yeah, I did see Negative Approach somewhat recently, and that was probably the only time in any recent memory where I even felt the impulse to mosh, which I denied. I did not mosh, but I was like, oh man, I
should do this. No. Yeah, every once in a while I'll still get it. There's certain bands, like a band like Hatebreed, I always want to like, oh man, I really want to stage dive, and Terror as well. But then I saw a friend and I saw Adolescence probably 2 years ago, and it was in a small club, and we're like, let's fucking get in the pit.
Yeah.
You know, it's cool. It's fun.
So what's the most recent mosh for you? When is the last time you moshed?
Okay, when we're saying mosh, are you just mean like in the mosh pit? Because actually I saw Lagwagon about 3 weeks ago, and it was or 3-4 weeks ago, and it was their anniversary of Let's Talk About Feelings.
Oh, dude. Yeah, so good.
And I straight up, a friend and I went, and we straight up, like towards the end, I was like, let's go get in the pit. Yeah. And so we're just push pitting around. And I remember afterward, I went and picked up my girl, and I was like, let's get some food. And she gets in the car and she goes, what's that smell? And I go, I don't know. And she goes, it smells like vinegar and hot dogs and like sweat. And I go, oh, I was in a punk mosh pit. And she's like, oh, sexy. And so that was probably the last time that I got into like a push pit. But I don't remember the last time that I like hardcore danced.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like
threw a kick. Yeah, threw a kick around. Yeah.
No, just throw my back out. Yeah. You know, like fuck that.
Yeah. Yeah. That I think Lagwagon played that record at Riot Fest, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
I didn't go, but I felt sad that I missed it.
Man, great record. It was awesome. It was very cool.
Yeah. So were you push moshing for A Prayer for Owen Meany, or whatever the last song is on it?
Yes,
dude, that song is so good.
It was great.
Yeah,
it was great. And then they did a full record, and then they did like actually, they opened up the set. They did like 4 songs. Then they did the full record, and they did like 4 more songs.
Oh, okay.
So it was a great show.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, so moshing for you would be Hatebreed.
Yeah, I think the last handful of like stage dives. I remember the last Bane show.
Yeah.
The last Bane show, I flew to Massachusetts, and I went to that, and for sure it was like jumping off the stage and like getting in the pit and climbing on people and all that stuff. Because that was like a very like special time. Like, oh, this is the last time they're gonna play. Even though those motherfuckers missed that band so much, it's not gonna shock me at all if they ever come back.
I mean, anything like that too, you know that at some point some festival will pool enough cash.
Yeah.
And just be like, hey, do you want to do this? And you're like, yeah.
Casey Jones gets offers,
And my favorite thing is just saying no.
No.
Yeah.
But there's a number, right?
To go no.
There's a number.
I don't know, because I mean, sure, like some insane
yeah,
number that's
sure.
never going to get offered. But even if someone was like, "We'll give you $50,000," right? Like, that's awesome. That would be great. But it's just like, it's kind of more fun just to say no.
Yeah.
Like, what's the point? And then especially doing like, well, we're getting paid $50,000. We each made $10,000. It's like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, not to sound like this, but it's like, I don't want to be just driven by money.
Sure.
That's why I play in a band like this.
Yeah. There's a lot of other better, more lucrative jobs.
Right. Yeah. I'm not making $1 million, but I tell my wife all the time, I go, you have the potential in your career to make $1 million. So what I need you to do is go make $1 million. So when this whole band thing ends, I can just be, because my dream after when I'm done with music is I just want to be like a janitor.
Yeah.
Like that's all that I want to do. Like a janitor at a mall or something like that. Just a job.
Why?
I really like cleaning.
Okay.
That I like to organize and to clean things. Like if I came to your gym, I would be like, hey, how about instead of paying, I like organize this back room.
Yeah, and we're looking at this right now, and there's all kinds of trash everywhere.
I dust those fake guitars off, and I don't know. I've just always liked the idea of it being a janitor.
Okay, so cleaning in particular is the thing.
Yeah. Like I think that after the band ends, if I could get it, for some reason, I really like this idea. I don't like going to malls, but I like the idea of being a janitor that cleans the mall after it's closed.
So no one's around.
No one. I don't want to be around.
Yeah.
people.
So there's no element of like being the sort of unseen person, kind of like doing stuff off to the side. It's that no one is there.
Yeah, it's just no one's there, and I can just do it however I want. I can have full control over cleaning in whatever order I want to do it in.
So
if anyone out there needs a janitor, hit me up.
Happy to clean. So how to clean everything.
Great record. That's the record that I learned. How to Clean Everything and Lagwagon Trashed are the two records that I learned how to play guitar from.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Propaganda is hard.
It is.
Is that record hard? I don't know if they were like good at guitar at that point. But
I think it. Yeah. I definitely thought it was.
Yeah.
Because my mom, for some reason, the only true motherly thing, like my brother and I were raised in a conservative Christian household, and it was kind of more like our mom and stepdad were like our employers, and we worked for them, so it was like, these are the chores, you do them, if you want dinner, you make it yourself. Yeah. Like it was kind of like that. And a very strange thing that my mother did, which I'm very happy about, is that one day she came to my brother and I and she goes, both of you need to learn how to play an instrument. And I was just thinking, this is nuts, because you don't even listen to music.
Here's your new chore.
Like I was like, all you listen to is Christian radio. Like, this is kind of crazy. And then she's like, you need to learn how to play the keyboard and the saxophone. And telling a 12-year-old that, I'm like, that is fucking whack. And I was like, no, I'm only going to play guitar or drums. And she goes, all right, guitar, because drums are too loud. And then a few years later, my brother learned how to play drums. And she took me to guitar lessons, and I hated it, because the guy was like teaching me how to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and stuff. And then I remember one day I brought in that Misfits tape, and I was like, how do I play this? It was like the scene in the movie. Like, how do I play this? And he put it on. He's like, oh, they're playing power chords. That's derived from a bar chord. And I go, how do I do that? And he's like, it's just like this. And I went, thanks. Yeah. And then that's where my guitar knowledge stopped. Yeah. I quit lessons, and then I just went home and played power chords. And then, I learned that how to clean everything, Propaganda record and Lagwagon Trashed. And those things were very, very hard and challenging, and they still are. But that kind of put me on that path. So both of those records really do I hold very close.
Yeah.
And when we toured with Lagwagon, I told Chris, the guitar player, that the guy who's often referred to as Big Bitch.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey man, it's really, it's really cool to be on tour with you guys. Like, this is how I learned how to play guitar, because of Trash. And he goes, that sucks. He goes, I learned how to play guitar from Black Sabbath, a real band. And then I just felt dumb. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks, later.
Dude, opening yourself up, being vulnerable, and just receiving harassment.
Why'd I tell you that?
Yeah, harassment and belittlement. I mean, that's actually a cool thing to say. That sucks, dude.
Yeah, I was
Fuck
like,
you,
all right,
man.
great. Fuck you, piece of shit. Get out of
Yeah.
here. You're off the tour.
Yeah. All right, you got to go in a second. I want to ask one more question
Okay.
about. So you're talking about liking to clean stuff and have everything be organized, yet you are a full-time touring musician and are also known for going on crazy trips to countries without any
Yes.
structure.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that? Those seem at odds. Do you just live a life of constant chaos and frustration?
Yeah, I think I do. I think I do enjoy frustration and chaos. I really do need a level of stress to feel at ease, which sounds crazy. And I think that that's why I really do enjoy going to unstable countries. And like when I went to Egypt and I got kidnapped, that whole thing happened.
Yeah.
A lot of people were like, "You're fucking stupid. Why would you ever go there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I understand how you think that's stupid. And I understand that, yeah, it is a dumb situation to put myself in, but I'm alive and nothing terrible really happened to me. And I enjoyed it."
Yeah.
So I'll keep going. And the thing, I have cut back on going to some places because I went to Tunisia by myself, and it was an insane trip. A bunch of crazy shit happened. But when I got home from that, ISIS had attacked a spot that I was hanging out at. Like, I have a picture of me on this beach, and like 4 or 5 days later, ISIS came and like shot a bunch of people. And at that moment, I was like, oh, maybe I should go to a different part of the world. So now I like to try to go to like Southeast Asia and places where there's a little bit less conflict. But I also, with touring used to be such an adventure whenever you first start, because the only traveling that I ever did as a kid was up to the North and South Carolina to visit family. And when I started going on tour, I was seeing all these other cities, and some were great and some were horrible and some were rich and some were poor. And I was meeting all these people and I was learning all these things about life that I was never taught about at home, because everything that I was taught about at home was coming from essentially the mouth of a politician or the mouth of a god. And so I would meet these people and go, oh, these people aren't bad. These people have the same kind of struggles, and kind of learned that, we're all the same, and every place really is somewhat very similar. And so the first decade of touring was so much of an adventure, especially because the bands that I were playing in, although we were established, the success was up and down. So sometimes you're on a bus, sometimes you're putting a sign at the merch table that says we need a place to stay. And then I end up sleeping in some weird basement where I wake up and there's a guy jerking off in the corner. You know what I mean? Like, you don't ever know what's going to happen.
Then did you also start jerking off?
Yeah, that's what you have to do to get out of that situation. That's the only way to get out. And, and so that adventure I was really attracted to, and I feel like I kind of learned so much through it. And as the older I've become and the more established Stick to Your Guns has become, is like, we don't really have to tour anymore in a, what I would call, hard situation. Most of the time we've got it pretty good. And so there's a part of me that still needs that kind of like unknowing, putting myself in situations where we're going to have to figure it out, because that's my favorite. To this day, like now that has become my favorite part of tour. A couple of tours ago, transmission blew out, and we were stuck in Canada and all this shit. And I was like, okay, we're going to get a U-Haul, and I'll sleep in the back of the U-Haul. I'll drive the U-Haul and this and that, blah, blah. And figuring out the problem inside the chaos. I love to do that. And so I think that that's why when I do personal trips now, I'm more attracted to those areas instead of going like, let's go to South Beach and relax at a resort. Like, that's just not for me. The only difference now is, someone fell in love with me and married me. So I have to go, oh, okay, I can't go to a place that's too fucked up. But her and I she's from Brazil originally, and we just took a trip to Brazil, and Brazil's got some fucked up places.
Yeah.
And we ended up in we were in this city, Manaus, because we actually ended up doing this gnarly trip, like living in the Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
for like 5 or 6 days.
Eating
which
toads,
which was
licking
wild.
toads,
piranha
Yeah.
everywhere. It was fucking cool. But when we got to Manaus, a lot of the cities in Brazil are like rated 0 to 100 for safety. 100 being like you walk out and someone just like skins you alive instantly, right? And Manaus was when we got there. I was like, oh, let me look this up, and it's 87. I was like, oh fuck, and so she's speaking Portuguese to the cab driver, and he was super cool. You know, he was telling us like, yo, don't pull your cell phone out anywhere. Don't do this. Don't do that. Pretty much just like don't do anything. And we're passing by this area that, you know, in most cities in Brazil, you can't walk up to someone's house. Everyone has a gate or a wall, and then there's barbed wire and there's shards of glass and all this shit. And we passed by this area that has like an extra tall wall, more barbed wire than anywhere else, more sharded glass. And she asked the guy, you know, is that the prison? And he tells her, no, that is where the politicians live. If they come outside, we will kill them. We're like, oh, great. And so that night we stayed at a hostel because the guy that was picking us up to take us into the Amazon the next day, he's like, yeah, if you stay at this hostel, it's only like $6 and it's like, it's all good and it's easy for me to pick you up from there. I'm like, all right, great. So I got us this private room, and it's maybe like a 7x7 room, had bunk beds, 2 single beds. So I was on top bunk, she was on bottom bunk. The door didn't have a lock or a handle. It was just kind of like a piece of plywood that I could have like punched through, right? Yeah. And we're kind of like laughing about it and everything. And then we go to sleep. We go to sleep, and all night long, sheer gunshots, people screaming, dogs barking, and I'm, you know, and I have like a knife with me, and I'm seeing like someone would walk up to in front of our door because I would see like the light at the bottom like block out, and then I'm like, all right, here's where someone comes in. I'm gonna have to fucking stab this motherfucker, and then they walk away, and so like I barely got any sleep, but I remember looking down, and she's just like, and then she woke up, you know, the next morning, and I was like, yo, did you hear that crazy shit last night? And she's like, oh, I heard some gunshots at some point. And then I'm like, oh yeah, this is where you're from. Like, you don't give a fuck.
Yeah, it's a lullaby to her.
Even though I have that thing where I'm like, oh man, like, someone loves me and like I got to be like careful now. Like, she doesn't give a shit. She's like, yeah, do whatever you want. Like before Trump got elected, she was working in Albuquerque. And I went and visited her, and it just so happened the day that I got there, Trump was at the convention center. And so there was anti-Trump protests, which I happily went down and joined, and talked to some people. And then I went, she's a actress, so I went and visited her on set, and I was telling her about it, and she's like, oh, what are you gonna do tonight? And I go, I think when I leave here, I'm just gonna go meet up with a friend and get some food. And so I leave, and I get in an Uber, and we get back to downtown. It's in Albuquerque, and all of a sudden, like, there's people like marching around like, fuck Trump, like all this shit, but they're like really like in good spirits, like being loud, like revving motorcycles, like all this shit, kind of just stopping traffic and shit. And I'm like, oh, this is fun. I'm gonna get out and join them. So I get out and join them, and it's like all cool. And I'm like talking to some people around, and then all of a sudden, like riot police show up, and then it turns into full scale protesters versus the cops. Like, I got slammed into a wall by a horse that the cop lost control of. I mean, these two other guys, like the ass of the horse that just smashed me up against this wall, like getting smashed with like tear gas canisters, and like picking back up, throwing them at cops. Like, people are throwing bricks at cops. It's getting out of control, right? And then like at one point, like there's these bikers show up, and they're on the side of the police, and then like a guy pulls a knife out, and like it gets fucking gnarly. And so it gets to a point where at the end of the night, like, I mean, this is going on for 2 hours, and now I'm like running the streets, like I can't see anything, my shirt's all torn up, and then I see like this white power guy beating the shit out of this like Mexican guy, and then I like break that up and like help the Mexican guy. His face looks like a bowl of fucking mashed potatoes, and like I get back to the hotel, and they think I'm like some crazy homeless guy. I'm like, you can't go outside, it's fucking chaos. And so I go to the hotel room, and my wife's still at work, and And I'm just like kind of like laying in this hotel room, like having this like, you know, like existential like crisis. You know, like what am I doing in this world and all these things, right? And then I get a text from her manager's boyfriend. Okay, and it's a group chat with the manager's boyfriend, myself, and my wife, and it's a picture of me on CNN, and it says protesters throwing rocks and bottles and bricks or something like that, and they're like, "Yeah, what are you doing?" And like I send back like a video, a crazy video that I had, and they were like, "Holy shit." And so I end up getting like, you know, a burger and some fries, and I turn on TV, and I don't have TV at my house. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to like veg out, and I watch some show, My 600-Pound Life or something like that. So I'm watching some reality show, and it's now like 3:30 in the morning, and my wife gets home, and I'm like pretty like shaken up from this whole experience.
That's very stimulating.
And and she's like, "Hey," and I'm like, "Hey." And she's like, "You okay?" And she's like, "Are you hurt?" And I go, "No, I'm fine." She goes, "Okay." And then she just takes a shower and goes to bed. And I'm like, "You don't even give a fuck." Because like where you come from, there's probably so much of that shit when you were a kid. And then the next day, I go back and visit her on set, and she's in the makeup room. And it was for a show where like she turned into like some crazy like demon thing. So they're putting like all this awesome prosthetics on her and shit. And so I'm sitting in there for like, you know, it probably takes like an hour and a half for them to put all that stuff on. And she goes, "What are you going to do tonight?" And I go, "Well, there's this music group called Insane Clown Posse that I saw is playing a block away from the hotel, and apparently it's the first time they've played Albuquerque in 10 years because the last mayor banned them. Ooh. But the new mayor is like the rock mayor, so he's lifted the band." And she's like, "Oh, what kind of music is it?" She doesn't know shit about it. And so I start telling about it, and one of the makeup artists goes, "You're going to see ICP?" He goes, "I'm from Detroit. I got stabbed at an ICP show once. That shit's crazy." And then she's like, "I don't think you should go." And I'm like, "I was in a riot last night and you didn't give a fuck. And now you're telling me not to go to an ICP show." She's like, "Please be careful." And the makeup guys were like, "Hey, can you like send her pictures like throughout the night? Keep us updated." I go, "Yeah, sure." So I go to the show. The first thing that happens is I'm walking in, this kid's walking out, and his whole face is busted open. I just send it to him, and she's like, "You gotta get out of there." Well, what's crazy is that the ICP show essentially ended just like the anti-Trump rally, like just people all over the street, cops everywhere, tear gas. And I was like, this is the greatest 48 hours anyone has ever had in Albuquerque.
And did you have the makeup artist do your clown makeup to go to the show?
I fucking wish. He had said something. He's like, "Dude, I could put some jug of paint on you." Yeah. And I was so tempted. But then I was like, you know, if I get outed as a fake at that show, they're gonna murder me.
This is not a true Juggalo.
Yeah. Yo, what the fuck? This guy's a fucking hack.
You're
not down with the clown?
This man is straight edge.
Yeah. I did get in the pit at the ICP show. I did. With that song that's like, "Who's going chicken hunting? We going chicken hunting." It was fucking chaos. So yeah, I guess I'm just attracted. I gotta have a level of chaos, I guess, at all times.
There we go. It all comes full circle. Josh, you got to go sound check, man.
I do.
New Stick to Your Guns record came out a year ago. It's good. What do you want people to do? Listen to it. Follow you on Instagram. What do you want?
Yeah, whatever, man. I don't care. Just do whatever you want to do.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'll post links to Josh's Instagram, some of the Stick to Your Guns stuff. Do you have that photo of you throwing rocks?
I know it's on my old laptop. I'll try to find it.
Dude, if you have that, send that to me. I'll post that too.
I'm wearing like a Teenage Bottle Rocket shirt, and I'm just like, that's ridiculous.
All right, I know you got to go, but one more funny story. My buddy was in a similar protest, and he actually had a bike that had "This bike is a pipe bomb" sticker on it.
Holy shit!
Right, because he was into folk punk, right? And then this bike is parked outside this protest, and he goes to get it, and the cops were like, "Is this your bike, dude?" They beat the shit out of him. Destroyed his bike and just beat him up.
Oh,
totally insane.
What a fucking bummer.
Very funny. All right, cool. We'll wrap this up. You got to go sound check.
All right.
Thanks for listening all the way through. I admire your grit, your persistence, and your perseverance. Since you made it, I have a few favors to ask of you. Go ahead and open up the show notes on whatever podcast player you use. In there, you'll find links to all the resources that were mentioned throughout the show. There's also some links there in which you can leave a review or subscribe to the show. And podcasters are always harping on this because this actually makes a difference in terms of the algorithms that recommend podcasts to new people. So if you do that, it helps more people find the show. And if you head over to toddneef.com, you can sign up to receive most of my thoughts and writing, which really only go out to the email list. A lot of it never makes it to the blog or the podcast. So if you like what I have to say and you want to see some of my recommendations and stuff that I've been checking out, go ahead and subscribe to that email newsletter as well.